A lot of video games were released this past year that were very, very long.
Shane, do we have time for this?
No, we don't, but we also don't have time to play these games.
Ooh, hot take!
We've been trying to play a lot of games recently, and one thing we've started to notice is that games are getting way too long.
Yeah, it's so difficult sometimes to sit down and be like, okay, I'm going to play this, and I'm going to get through the bulk of this. There's a lot going on, though, man. There's a lot to talk about here, because games have evolved. We as people have grown old.
No, look, that's not the thing. No. You can't blame age at this, okay? Look, when I was a kid...
Priorities that come into life a little later.
When
I have children to feed, grandkids to mingle with.
You don't
Great-grandkids to...
You don't have any of those things. You don't even have a cat. Look.
All I have is my video games.
Here's the thing, folks. There are tons of video games out there that have extended, and I would argue, artificially elongated gameplay. Mm-hmm. Now, back when I was like younger, playing NES and like early PlayStation 64 and stuff like that, there were plenty of games that took a little bit of extra time to play, and that was fine. It's not like these games would take days and days and days, and it's not bad if a game does happen to take a very long time to play. However, what I'm specifically talking about are games that artificially pad the amount of time it takes to complete because they're not giving you good things to do.
When I think about a game and the time that is allotted into that game, I feel like almost like a game can be whatever time that they plan on having, but within that content they need to prove to us that it's something that's compelling that will keep us there, right? So you're thinking of some games that you say are artificially extending the game itself. Do you have any core examples that you jump to immediately?
Yes, I do. But first, an example of a game that didn't do that. Now, Adam, you came up with a list of games, and you've come up with the average times. Now, this is from which website?
This is from howlongtobeat.com.
I go to this website all the time when I'm looking to see how long a game is going to take to beat, so I can roughly know how much time it's going to take me to actually beat the game.
Because some games are too long?
Yeah, that's exactly why, okay? So one instance I have of this. Let's talk about Mario Odyssey.
Yeah, okay. Super Mario Odyssey, I have here 12 and a half hours on average.
Now, you and I both played Mario Odyssey. That game, from beginning to end, does not waste your time.
It's engaging.
It gives you so much stuff to do. And those 12 hours felt like days of fun things to do, right?
That's right.
And you could go back and keep on playing it if you really want.
That's one of the things I loved about that game. Okay, 12 and a half hours is for just the main storyline, so that's just completing the game as a whole. There's tons of moons, there's other DLC that's been added on since that will elongate the game, but yeah, it's compelling things that are there afterwards.
Yes.
But you have your really juicy, good main sort of storyline track that you go through with that game.
Now, there are plenty of games that have a main storyline that are open world now, and those main storylines can usually be completed a little bit faster. However, there are elements of storylines that require you to do side quests that allow you to get to the main storyline again. And that's a way to kind of break the gamer out of utilizing one straight path of playing the game and give them experiences that kind of go, look, here's a taste of some other aspect of the gameplay, and you can go back. Now, a great example of this was Spiderman. Spiderman on the PlayStation 4 was a really, really, really good game. How long did it take to beat that one?
I think I have it here somewhere.
I don't think you
do not. I believe it was 16 hours. Maybe 18. It was either 16 or 18 hours to complete. I did see it.
All right, so that game took quite a bit of time to play.
Does that sound right to you?
It probably did. You know, here's the thing, right? When I played that game, I just enjoyed it. I didn't think about how much time it took to play, and that's usually a sign to me that the game is doing quite well. There's tons of side quests, tons of things to do on top of that. Those are important for people that want to get more value out of purchasing that one game. Now, look, we are a little bit biased. We review video games all the time. So for us, if a game takes an incredibly long time to play, then it might not be great for us to play because we can't actually beat the whole thing. But when it came to Spider-Man, that was a game that felt like there was a lot to do and a lot more to do, and we could go back and visit again if we wanted to. And that, to me, is the right way to deal with it, especially when it comes to open world games.
I really feel like a game can be whatever time, like Spider-Man 16 hours, let's say. But yeah, it's the bits that are compelling. Like if you do want to make, like let's say, I'm dreaming of making a 40-hour game, as long as there's that hook or something that keeps things interesting. You're talking about artificially padding out games, right? Could we maybe jump to a title that is, I know of one I can mention right now that was artificially padded out.
Do it.
So there was the Shadows of War game that had come out. There is like, if you want to wrap up kind of the main core of the game, the ending of that game is like ambiguously placed into this grind, okay? It's a grind that does something egregious that I wanted to talk about. So, like, if you want to complete the game proper, the main storyline, you need to defend your keep, basically, right? And it's a grind fest. It's a grind fest that not only artificially pads out the game, doesn't really introduce many new cool gameplay mechanics, but it also, this is a problem that I think is happening more and more nowadays, it also is kind of pushing people like, hey, you don't want to grind so much? Pay a little extra money. And I really want to talk about this because I feel like this is happening more and more nowadays.
Where
microtransactions, like it's so very slowly they're being pushed into video games. Like, oh no, it's fine. It's a hat. Oh, it's a color for your armor. No, it's getting to the point where it's like, no, you want to properly. You won't get the trophy for completing the game unless you complete this part. And if you want to complete this part, you have to grind for 20 additional extra hours, and it just feels padded.
Assassin's Creed Odyssey was well criticized for that.
Okay, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, 35 hours for the main story.
35 hours, but if you paid extra, you could actually complete things faster because of that.
Right.
That's the kind of stuff I hate seeing. Now, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, I think, is one of the biggest Assassin's Creed games they have ever made. There is so much to see and so much to do that the majority of the gamers that I've spoken to that have actually completed it, because personally, I couldn't finish it. It was way too big. There were aspects of the game that kept going and going and going and didn't seem to have any general focus. Unfortunately, I couldn't give you a personal opinion about that because for me, it got so crazy at one point that I was like, look, I could visit each and every one of these islands. I could do all that stuff, but it's just like, this is just weighted down. If this was the one game you bought, then you would hope that gameplay was done in a way that made sense.
Right.
But to know that there's like a little piece of content that you can purchase additionally that speeds stuff up, and to, by the way, that's to the detriment of the gamer, because by speeding certain things up, you don't learn certain mechanics, or your character doesn't work the same way. There are actual problems with doing that as well, so it doesn't feel like it was organically placed into the game.
One thing about video gaming that I've always said is that games, and this is so dumb, it's so simple, it's dumb. Games are made to be played. Don't introduce us to a world where you don't want to play or you want to buy a fast forward button. And it sounds very much like part of that is ingrained in that. It is in the Shadows of War title that I was talking about, and we are seeing that more and more.
Now, when I talk about padded gameplay, I'm pretty sure a lot of you out there are like, well, what does that even mean? So I went back on my Steam list to take a look at some of the games that I have played that have taken a very long time to complete. And one of the games was Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. Now, I was a big fan of Ground Zeroes. Ground Zeroes probably takes, what, like 30 minutes, an hour to beat?
I do know the time amount on that. It's 1.5 hours.
Okay, I know that doesn't sound that crazy, right, folks? But you can beat that, and then there's a whole bunch of stuff that keeps adding on to it, makes it better and better and better. Unlockable sequences, extended gameplay. It's basically a demo, okay? I'm not saying it's like this massive game or anything.
It's funny because to an extent it's like not padded out. You have your like core sort of mission, and then it's like, and then make your own fun.
Yes.
Like I wouldn't even call it padded out.
But that's good. See, there's
a big difference between what we're talking about here, right?
See, what they did in that game was so beautiful because it was a small amount of gameplay that you got that gave you the feel of the game, but then they just kept giving you things to do and made it more fun and fun. However,
whereas the final
Phantom Pain,
this is a fantastic comparison, really.
Phantom Pain, I didn't even realize this. 60 hours of my actual time to play that game.
Yeah.
And the problem wasn't with the way that they pad things out. Or it's not that the game takes like 5 minutes to beat and then there's like hours and hours of things extra to do. There's plenty of other things to do in the game. However, one of the problems I had immediately was that there are tiny little elements that take a couple of minutes. For instance, when you go to an area in a map, you have to ride in a helicopter. When you call the helicopter in, you have to wait for it to arrive. That can be maybe 5 minutes, maybe 6 minutes, but the problem is you do that, one thing, calling a helicopter, arriving in a helicopter, you do that with every mission. I found myself doing that at least a couple hundred times. So 6 minutes times a couple hundred, guess what you're doing right there? You're spending hours of your actual life sitting there watching nothing.
Yeah.
You need stuff to be a lot more instant.
I think even if you're not aware of it in that moment, maybe you were. Maybe,
I was.
Yeah. Maybe you're aware. Like, even if the game is very compelling, it's those moments that create like a fatigue, let's say. So I played the Phantom Pain as well. I got to what I considered to be the ending of the game. It was like the first chunk, and then it was like, oh well, there's more. And then I remember in that moment just being so fatigued with what I had already played that I was like, no. And I just left it. It's the first Metal Gear Solid game I had left like that.
Well, here's the thing. Metal Gear Solid 5 has an excuse, or sorry, Phantom Pain has an excuse for this.
Because of all the Konami?
All the Konami stuff that happened. Kojima left the company. There's a lot of stuff that went on there that produced a game that is half finished. So it's unfortunate that that's in that state. However, the companies have less of an excuse. And now I'm going to talk about Red Dead Redemption 2 for the very first time.
Ooh, I have those numbers too.
Okay, how long does it take to on average to beat that?
41 and a half hours.
Sounds about right to me. I probably played it for a little bit longer than that. Something I can tell you immediately about Red Dead Redemption 2 is that the world is packed with so many interesting things. Now, we're not going to spoil the story for you, folks. If you want to experience it, you're going to have to go and play it yourself, or read a Wikipedia page where they spoil it. What I'm going to tell you here, though, is that there's certain elements that don't spoil the story that kind of give you an idea about the problems I had with the game.
Okay.
Lots of stuff to do. Lots of really cool things to do. However, it's missing some features you would have found in Grand Theft Auto, and actually missing some features you would have found in the original Red Dead Redemption. In the original Red Dead Redemption, you can set up a base camp pretty much anywhere by just setting it up. Once you've done that, you've unlocked fast travel. That fast travel ability allows you to basically go anywhere in the world really, really quick. Red Dead Redemption 2 doesn't have that. In Red Dead Redemption 2, even fast travel, when you do unlock it, and there's a way to unlock it, but it's not on your actual camp.
You can call a taxi?
No, you can't do that. There are fast travel areas in the game, whether it be riding in carriages or going on a train, or in some cases there's also some other place to do it too. That's a spoiler, but there is a way to do it. However, it's not active all the time. When you do activate it, though, it doesn't just flash you automatically to where you need to be. It takes a bunch of cutscenes to get there. Those cutscenes add minutes. Over time, and once in a while, too, where you want to be isn't exactly where you're going to be dropped off. And in a game like this, where you're walking or taking a horse, it can take a lot of time. I found myself burning through time doing little to nothing in the game, and that padded out my gameplay experience. When I say that if I had played this game for 40 hours, and I know I played it for longer, I have to honestly say that 10 of those hours was basically used just walking to places or riding to places and doing very little to nothing. And on top of that, too, there are other things they've done, like when you go to hunt animals and stuff like that. Those animals that you hunt and capture and all that, in the original game, you just captured them, you skin them or whatever, you put it in your sack, and it would never fill up, right? You would just keep doing that over and over again. There's expansions for the original game and stuff like that where you can modify things to make them better. But in Red Dead Redemption 2, you basically, if you want like a carcass of an animal you got, you have to put that one carcass on the back of your horse, ride it back to a place, then go back out and hunt again. No. Like, it's insane, the amount of time it takes to do those things. Now, Red Dead Redemption 2 has a billion things to do, whether it be fishing, hunting, robbing stagecoaches, doing whatever you want to do, and that's really awesome. But the problem is, it's so weighted down with a lot of just boring aspects of those things that don't make it fun. I like the gamification of those things rather than the implementation of realism. And Red Dead Redemption 2 strayed so close to realism that it ended up being a little bit too just boring in many instances.
It's kind of interesting that you bring it up because from what I've read, the realism aspects of Red Dead, they're in there just for the art of the game, right?
Sure.
It is the experience of being in the Old West. It's not about, like we had mentioned before, egregious microtransactions or anything like that. So you feel like it's a failure on Rockstar's part that those pieces are in there. Do you feel like they're straying from what makes those games like? I mean, it's a video game. When you think of a video game, you think of something that is compelling. It's something where you're manipulating a character or a scenario. Did you feel like you were like hands off for too long?
Go watch other people talk about the game. Go watch some other reviews. And while people praise the game for its details, which I do as well, you'll hear a lot of people repeat this phrase a lot. It's slow. It's a slow-moving game. It's slowly paced. Those are not good aspects because sometimes if you have a slow-paced scene, that stands out against a bunch of scenes that were played fast. But there are so many slow-moving pieces in the game that it is ridiculous. And I don't feel that those things work so well. I mean, for a narrative reason, they might be there or not. That's fine. But I always felt that if I'm about to do a mission, I'm like, okay, I have to put like an hour aside or something because 30 minutes of my time is going to be spent just riding to the dang place I got to go to, right?
And then sometimes folks like us, we have schedules, right? And if you know that this game's going to be a slog, and every time you sit down to do a mission, it's going to be, well, this is going to be at least an hour and a half or 2 hours. I only have 30 minutes because I got to go make dinner or I got something else to do. When I hear something like that, I'm completely turned off.
Even when I was a kid, though, playing games that were very big and wide, and a lot of those games existed back then, I could not see myself ever playing a game that demanded that much time from me and like not giving me a response back, like an instant kind of gratification type of thing. So an example of this is I've actually seen some folks on Kotaku write about this. I believe Jason Schreier wrote about this, but there's a risk-reward system, or what's called a gameplay reward. So while you're playing a game, let's just say you're playing Metroid, you get things in the game that keep expanding and keep giving you abilities and stuff like that.
They pop that little the pleasure sensor in your brain, right? Oh, okay, I have another heart added to my life bar.
Yeah, exactly. Grand Theft Auto, very good at that.
Sure.
Red Dead Redemption, the original, very good at that. Red Dead Redemption 2, terrible at that.
If you hear that a game is, let's say, the average completion time is like 40 hours, and you hear that another game that you really want to play is, let's say, 6 to 8 hours, do you feel like without hearing any sort of title whatsoever, do you feel like you gravitate more towards one or the other because of the time?
Personally,
it's hard to answer, I know.
I would do it this way.
Yeah.
If I could go back, if I knew that the game had something in it that I could go back and play it again and again, and it was shorter, I'm more likely to do that.
Okay.
If the game is longer but it's supposed to be good, I will play the entire game all the way through because I know that it's giving me the gameplay in the time it's requiring from me. But more often than not, I find that many of the games that are being released lately are more open world type experiences and games like that, or even online experiences. And by the way, online experiences, when it comes to time invested, totally different. I'll play an online game for way longer than any other game because the gameplay is being had with friends.
Right.
Like, okay, Smash Brothers, I'm going to be playing Smash Brothers Ultimate over and over and over. Friends are going to come to my house. We're going to be playing it together in groups. It'll be in tournaments and stuff like that. It's going to be a game I'm going to be playing for years. There's a reason why the game is designed the way it's designed. But I'm telling you, when it comes to a game that has a billion things to do and it doesn't have any general focus, but it demands like days and days of your
multiple
time,
hours,
that's not so great.
Yeah,
I
feel very similar to you because we've had conversations about, hey, what are you playing? Oh, hey, Spider-Man's coming out, or Grand Theft Auto 5, whatever, something's going on, or Red Dead Redemption, and I feel so fatigued by many sandbox games because I know, like, I have that addictive sort of nature within me where I'm like, I want to get every little trinket, and if there's anything on that map at the end of the game, I am unhappy, right?
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, I feel myself being a little more biased towards those shorter experiences, and what you brought up, I believe, is very interesting in that, I will come back to certain games and play them over and over again and possibly spend 40 hours replaying Mega Man X1. Oh, it's like you beat it in what, an hour and a half, 2 hours or something? But the game is so good and it just... the pleasure sensor's in the brain.
Sure.
It ticks every box for me, and then I can just keep going back and playing it again. Whereas, like, I know that there are great experiences out there that are sandbox games. I've heard great things about Assassin's Creed Odyssey. There's some problems as well.
Sure.
But I know that there's going to be that map, and there's going to be those icons, and I will never.
You'll never be able to get them all.
I don't want to. I don't like. I know I'm going to be like, I need that feather, and also that helmet, and also that. Right.
So when it comes to Nintendo games, this is very specific with them. I feel Nintendo respects the player's amount of time a lot more than other game developers. But that changed when it came to Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild was the very first time where, in my opinion, that Nintendo was like, okay, here's a billion things to do. Walk in a direction for hours, like do whatever you want to do. And it's like, okay, they really placed a lot of emphasis on the things you can do in the outworld. So for me, I always felt that Breath of the Wild was them testing that world.
Right.
And I know that, and look, folks, if you're a fan of Nintendo like I am, I think you're going to agree with me. Whatever the next Zelda game is that Nintendo makes, if it follows the same ideas as Breath of the Wild, they're going to, they made an open world game. Now they're going to take the open world game and they're going to refine it and improve it upon where no one else has done it before, because that's what Nintendo's good at.
Yeah.
Red Dead Redemption 2 is not an evolution of open world games. I feel it's more of a pullback and an example to try something else. Grand Theft Auto isn't really an evolution of open world games. Grand Theft Auto 5 basically feels like Grand Theft Auto 4 with some different kind of gameplay mechanics. The games aren't really that drastically different. It's the online modes of those games that really change. And I think they've left the single player worlds alone for too long, that they don't realize that there's new things to do in those worlds that they simply haven't explored yet.
Yeah, and artificially lengthening things. It feels like with Red Dead Redemption 2, like you know how there are great movies, right? There are some movies that come out that are like, okay, it's really good, slow burn. It's about 2.5 hour, 3 hour movie. Cool, right? Oh, okay, 3 hours, not an hour and a half, it's fine. It feels like they were implementing that slow burn into Red Dead Redemption 2, like, oh, whatever, slow burn movies are cool. I don't think it's you can take a cinematic experience like that per se and just say no, it'll scale perfectly within a video game. It's two different mediums.
Yes.
Right? And I don't know that we should be looking at one medium and saying like, no, it should be more like this. Like, games are what they are. They're their own beast.
Right now we're basically dealing with a world where a whole bunch of game developers are making games that take a lot of time to complete. And we're not saying that those games are necessarily bad. All we're saying is that this is the Wild West. Once again, referencing Red Dead Redemption 2, the idea is that games are being made right now that have never been made in the past, and they're trying new ideas and trying examples for things.
Which is important.
Yeah, RPGs in general take hours and hours and hours to beat.
40 to 80 hours usually for your traditional JRPG.
But a JRPG typically is a story. It's essentially you're reading a novel.
And again, going back to that compelling nugget, whether it's collecting a heart container that gives you more health, or it is unlocking that next moment with the characters in your party in an RPG, you need those hooks, right?
Yeah.
So if it is an 80-hour game, it's fine, but it can't. It can't feel bloated.
Yes.
It has to be compelling.
In my opinion, how I feel about this is that if you have a game that takes a really long time, and I'm talking days and days to play, as long as you're enjoying the gameplay, you're likely not going to notice the time's passing by. But the moment a game becomes basically boring and just repetitive,
tedious,
then eventually you're just going to get sick of playing the game. And I think that's a factor for all games out there that eventually get bored of playing them. But I do believe that if a game is designed really well, and you know that it's good, you're going to want to go back to it again and again.
Right.
There's games like that with me when it comes to puzzle games. That's why I like them so much. I will play Tetris over and over. I'll play Puyo Puyo all the time.
Yeah.
But sometimes games fail to understand that it's the core of the game that makes it so fun. And if they ever attempt to pad out gameplay by making you pay for it,
oh my gosh,
that
chills
is just
down my spine, man.
It's the worst thing. Well, folks, what do you think? Do you like oppressively long games,
Yeah.
or do you like short games?
What do you think about super long hot takes? Because those are things too.
Yeah. Let us know what you think.